My name is Anna Brees. I'm here with John Wedger, and it's the 8th of March 2019, and we're taking a little bit of a tour around London today, John, going to some of the spots that you used to work out of. And when did you cover this area of London? What period?
The beginning of the 2000s. In the investigation I was on, the children ranged from 9 years to 14 years.
And when was the last time you witnessed that kind of age group?
2005 to 2006.
So it was still going on then?
Very, very active then. And I was aggressively shut down, removed from post, and then it carried on with impunity. And really to this day, I don't know who they put in post to deal with it.
Now we're going to go around those areas of London that you've mentioned and talk about the experiences and of what you encountered during your service. Okay?
Yep. Now this is the main area. This is in Paddington, Sussex Gardens. Right, Sussex Gardens is the main thoroughfare from here. It goes down to Bayswater at the bottom west end of it. Towards the east end of it, we have the Edgware Road, which is the heart of London's Arab community. What makes this area quite unique was that this was the heart of where the children were being used, were being pimped out. They were being pimped out by what was termed a known common prostitute, and she was the sort of the queen bee of the prostitutes, and she was coordinating all these children. And what would happen is that they were very wary of the police. They knew the cars that we drove, and they knew the nights we worked, and they got to know us, you know, by name, a lot of them, so they was always looking out. Now the kids, and these were girls, and the ones that we were dealing with aged from 9 to 14 years old, right? And every single one of these kids was harbouring a Class A drug addiction as well. The children were first put onto cannabis, and then it was advanced into crack cocaine and heroin. Now, if you can see on the corner here, you've got a bush area. This is pretty well maintained. Further down, over by the monkey puzzle tree, you've got more coverage of foliage over there, and the kids will be hidden in the bushes. So when the police came along, the kids were placed in there, and then if they stopped and spoke with some of the prostitutes, the police would then go, whether they would take a girl in or they'd let her go, and then the kids were brought out again. Now, one of the little girls, she's now deceased, and I am going to name her. Her name was Zoe, and she was the main one giving evidence. She was a very brave young girl. She remembers recalling that she was hidden in the bushes. A police car had pulled up. This was a uniformed police car, and they'd gone to speak to the woman that was pimping her out. And she said that the girl was flirting with the officers, and one of the officers actually leaned over and lifted this woman's skirt up, lifted this prostitute's skirt up as they were talking to her, and Zoe was hidden in the bushes watching this, and she actually gave that as part of her evidence. There's budget hotels, if you can see over the side here. These are cheap budget hotels, and these would accommodate, you see a lot of vans there, these sort of builders would utilise these rooms. And what would happen is that at night, a couple of the hotels, the night watchman, the night security would rent the rooms out to the prostitutes per hour to use their clients. That would also be made available for the young girls that were being pimped out. So they would be taken with the prostitute and a client to some of these, but I'm not going to name any of them now because it wouldn't be fair, because this is going back 2 decades and a bit less. And a room would be made available, the clients would go down there, and the young girl would be presented, and they would pay by hour. Also, the night watchman would also be supplied with crack cocaine as well. Right, we're now in Mayfair, and the relevance of Mayfair is that this is one of the wealthiest parts of Europe, actually. It's a very ostentatious area, and it's actually dripping with wealth. Just behind us we have Berkeley Square. Over to the right is Curzon Street. You've got some of the wealthiest casinos in the world there, with the highest payouts in the world. There's a lot of private clubs. This area was actually alluded to by Anthony Daly in his book Playland, where he was taken as a rent boy and he was pimped out in quite a few salubrious gentlemen's clubs around here. Now, The reason it has relevance to my account is that the girls were saying that they were pimped out to very wealthy Arab restaurants in Mayfair, and they said they were taken to one particular restaurant in this area, and they were sold for sex, and that the clients were paying £2,000 per hour for the services of these girls. Now, that the paradox here is that one day the girls could have been taken to a big high-rise council estate and would have been pimped out for the matter of pennies, really, for a few quid, and exchanged for rocks of crack cocaine in what we term as a crack house. So it will be usually a flat in a big council estate, which is used for the purposes of selling Class A drugs. So on one hand, they'll be taken there with very sort of low market clientele, and then, you know, within hours they could be taken to this area, and they said the restaurant would be after hours, where they were sold for £2,000 per hour. And the girl said they never received a penny of that. All they were given was some rocks of crack cocaine. Right, we're now in Soho. This is another area that the street prostitutes would work, and another area that the kids were taken to, the girls were taken to. It's quite iconic with prostitution, and this has got a long history with prostitution, this area. And what we're seeing now, we're getting a lot coming out in the news about the Muslim grooming gangs. Now, what I want to say in reference to that is that if we want to talk about the history of prostitution and street prostitution, this area was quite infamous during the 50s and the 60s, this is Walker's Court, because of the Maltese gangsters that were running the prostitution. They had taken off of the Italians, and then that led on to the Caribbean gangs, which then led on to the East European gangs, and then the gangs that come from the Kosovo and that area, you see. So it's a progressive thing, it's forever evolving. So when we're seeing it on the media that it's predominantly Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, that is highly inaccurate when we are talking about the history of street prostitution, which does in turn dovetail with the children that are used. So, but this is quite a well-known area. And what happens here, this area is quite a straight scene, as it were, but that is changing now. But what we're going to see now, we're going to go further down towards Piccadilly Circus, and we're going to start getting into the area. Okay, right, we're in the heart of Soho now. We're in Great Windmill Street. We're literally a stone's throw away now from what is termed the meat rack, where we'll be going shortly. And the reason that I've stopped here is I had a source of information, an informant, as it might have been called back in the day. And the guy was a very prominent Maltese gangster, shall I say. I'm going to leave it at that. And he was very active in back in the day, and the day would have been the 50s through to the 60s in prostitution. He was a pimp. And this fellow was telling me about police corruption within the Metropolitan Police's Vice Squad. And what he was saying was that the money that he made from prostitution in the environs here was huge. He made a fortune from it. The Vice unit knew about it, and what he would do is, we'll let this go, it's a busy part of London, that every week there would be a collection, and he would be met by higher ranked officers than constables, so I don't really know what he meant by that. And he would pay them. He would be passing over brown envelopes of cash, sometimes containing as much as £2,000 to these officers. Now that was later corroborated because there was Operation Countryman, which was instigated by the Home Office to look into police corruption within the Vice unit and the taking of what we used to call bungs, which was money from the pimps and organised criminals. And as a result of that, there was a decree by the Home Secretary that the Clubs and Vice unit, which used to be based over at West End Central and then ended up at Charing Cross, would never be able to take detective constables, only police constables. Now that was corroborated in the ICSA inquiry only yesterday by a former inspector of the Vice unit, Paul Holmes. Now I was one of the first detectives to be on the Vice unit, And also I later spoke to an officer that was part of Countryman, and he told me, he corroborated really what my source was saying, that there were police officers taking huge amounts of money. So what I'm saying here is that there has been a marked history, a dark history at that, involving officers from the Clubs and Vice unit, corrupt links with the gangsters and with the pimps. So it's always been there, they've always known about it, and it was sort of something which I come across. Right, we're in Piccadilly Circus. Behind me now we have a parade of shops. Where Boots is, before that was Burger King, and before that was the Wimpy Bar. And the Wimpy Bar was the meat rack. And the children would be paraded in the front window of the Wimpy Bar, and the customers then, the punters as they were called, would pick them out. And the clients were all young boys, what were termed as rent boys. And what we're going to do, just going to pan around, just going to move around. And I'm going to point now to Shaftesbury Avenue. Take a left up Shaftesbury Avenue, and just up there, opposite number 32 Shaftesbury Avenue, was where Playland was, and that was the amusement arcade where also boys were picked up, and that formed the basis of the book by Anthony Daly called Playland, but it was also mentioned by Michael Tarraga in his account, as was the Wimpy Bar. Right, we're in Piccadilly Circus. Behind it is Eros, which ironically is classed as the god of love, or the goddess of love. This area it literally is across the road is the old meat rack. It's still in the environs of the meat rack, and this would not be another pickup point outside the front of Eros here. And this was mentioned in Audrey Harper's book Dancing with the Devil, in which, busy Central London, in which she speaks about this is where she would meet up, and she would go out on order of people that were involved in her satanic cult to pick up young kids for sex parties. This area was also mentioned to me by an informant many years ago, who said that when he was out of the care system, that he was also brought to the meat rack and would also be picked up outside of Eros. And he's a guy that I've mentioned a couple of times in my interviews, that he was picked up in a white Rolls Royce and taken to the Hampstead area and violently sexually assaulted to the point he nearly died. The other reason that this area has some significance for the pimping out of children is that this was the only part of London where the public toilets, the underground toilets, actually had showers. So the homeless would go and take a shower down there, and it was also used as a pickup point. So the whole area is synonymous with the pimping out of children, rent boys, child prostitutes, whatever you want to term it. At the end of the day, the result is the same thing. This area was the hub of it. We're making our way to Pocock Street in Southwark for the end of the week's proceedings regarding the ICSA trial. And en route from the West End, from Soho, we've come across the black cab drivers dispute, which I have covered before. And if we can look all the way up Whitehall, it's chock-a-block, they've gridlocked it. We go over Westminster Bridge again, and if we look down towards the west, they've done exactly the same with Millbank and the whole of Parliament Square. Now, their beef is regarding the restrictions to their routes. They are so passionate about the damage to what really is one of the capital's biggest institutions, the black cabs, that they have total solidarity. We are seeing the destruction of the essence of a society, and that is the abuse of our children, yet this thing is not covered on the national media. There are no protests, there is absolutely nothing, no one seems to care. And we've got to take, like I said before, a leaf from these guys' books and start getting together, not fighting each other, not dividing each other, standing together and doing what is right. If they can be this passionate, and they are making a difference, this is peaceful, it's sparsely policed, yet they have brought, once again, central London to a standstill, and I say right on them. And what are we doing? We're doing nothing. Nothing. We need to get a grip. and we need to get together and we need to stop this vile, evil attack on our children, and we need to make those in that building over there accountable for their actions. And we are now seeing what's coming out of the collusion with the politicians and special branch in covering up brave whistleblowers like myself and many other police officers that we've heard evidence from this week. So come on, let's sort this out.